Hey, everybody, it's Jeff Hansen. It's an instant reaction show. BYU Arizona just finished up a couple of minutes ago. The Cougars 41-19 over Noah Fifita, Tetairoa McMillan. BYU had their way. Strong second half. Instant reaction. I haven't looked into all of the box score numbers. I haven't rewatched plays. I haven't talked to anybody. This is just me watching the game. I'm at home today. Let's do an instant reaction show because really, if we can be honest, that second half, that wasn't really stressful, right? That fourth quarter really wasn't stressful. So I've had some time to pull together some thoughts at least. So let's talk about it. BYU gets a win. It started off 8 a.m. this morning. Big noon kickoff shows up. Urban Meyer is there. BYU fans booing everybody or booing Urban Meyer. It was great. Cosmo jumps out of a plane, does his things. It's homecoming. Steve Young shows up. Fred Warner's at the game. Puka Nakua's at the game. I mean, there was just no way that BYU was going to lose this game. The vibes in Provo and around LaVell Edwards Stadium, unreal, unbelievable. But let's get into some of the stuff that I noticed from the game. And the first thing that I want to talk about, complementary football. You hear Kalani Sitake talk about complementary football, team football. You've heard it from both coordinators as well. Every coach says it. But what we saw from BYU, especially late third quarter and into the fourth quarter, was maybe the best illustration for all of us to see of what they're talking about when they talk about complementary football. Okay, so at the time, BYU was up 3 scores. I want to say it was 27-10. Arizona goes on a long drive, ends up in a field goal, right? A field goal, I believe there was 9 or so minutes at the end of that drive in the fourth quarter to go 27-13 or whatever the score ended up being. I think it was 27-13. That drive took 8 minutes. It was like a 14-play drive. I mean, it was some crazy long drive. And my initial reaction as I'm watching it is I'm frustrated as BYU can't get off the field. I'm frustrated when it's 3rd and 3 and they pick up 4 yards. But what we saw from Jay Hill's defense was that complementary football that Kalani Sitake talks about so much. BYU was up 3 scores. They needed to run the clock. Jay Hill, he called a game plan that BYU wasn't going to get beat deep. They weren't going to let Arizona score quickly. Arizona might score, but they were going to have to drain the clock. They were going to have to slowly move the ball down the field. And that's exactly what happened. Red zone comes in, defense buckles down. Arizona has to settle for 3. BYU still has a 2-score lead, and Arizona just wasted nearly 8 minutes of clock. That is what Kalani Sitake is talking about when he says team football, complementary football. The defense was rolling. They could have continued to sell out and sent a ton of pressure, and they sent a ton of pressure all game long. They could have jumped routes. They could have tried to make something happen. But the one thing you don't want to do as the fourth quarter is starting and you have a 3-score lead is allow the opponent to score quickly. That's exactly what Jay Hill called as a game plan or fourth quarter game plan that Arizona was not going to be able to score quickly. They gave up some points, but it didn't matter because the clock was on BYU's side. Now the offense did their part too. The offense, that next drive, as soon as Arizona kicked that field goal, it's 27-13. They went the other way. They said, hey, let's get my defense back on the field. It was a 40-yard pass. You have a 2-score lead, and Aaron Roderick dials up a beautiful play to Darius Lassiter when Arizona was selling out to stop the run because they figured, hey, they're draining clock. No, complementary football. Take your shots when it was there. This was maybe the most well-rounded game from BYU that in every aspect of the game, it felt like they won. The defense forces 4 turnovers. That's huge. The offense, they had a really, really good game. Jake Retzlaff, he had a little bit of a lull in the third quarter, but ultimately finishes 18 of 32, 218 yards and a pair of touchdowns. He adds 28 yards. That's what it says there. 28 yards on the ground. Really tidy game from Jake Retzlaff. He does not turn the ball over. Full suite of running backs. So we see a lot of Hinckley Ropati, a lot of LJ Martin. LJ was phenomenal. LJ, 11 carries for 49 yards. He also added a couple of catches, 3 catches for 46 more yards. He finds pay dirt twice. LJ Martin's phenomenal in this game. Hinckley Ropati, that fumble in the fourth quarter that gave Arizona just a glimmer of hope late. That's really the only downside to what I saw from Hinckley Ropati. This was his best game of the year, 9 carries for 65 yards. He did have that fumble. That fumble hurt. Parker Kingston throws a touchdown. Parker Kingston catches a touchdown. Isaiah Glasker was everywhere. Good for him to get that pick six to cap things off. Sam Vanderhaar seals the game, pinning Arizona down with a punt at the 1 yard line. Will Farron made all of his field goals attempts. Look, guys, this was just a perfectly well-rounded game from BYU. I am more impressed coming out of this game than I have been any other BYU game this year. Now, impressed is the right word. I was more surprised, more excited after BYU beat Kansas State because I didn't see that coming. I don't think very many people saw that coming, at least not that way. That game was unreal. It was unlike anything I've ever seen. Nobody saw that game going that way. So that was the most exciting win. But I come out of this game. We're now 6 games into the season. BYU is 6-0. They're going bowling this year. That was the goal. Remember, that was the goal this year. BYU got there in their first 6 games. And coming out of this game, I'm looking at the rest of the schedule, and there's some tough tests. There's no question about it. Oklahoma State is coming off of a bye. UCF, that's a lot of travel. Utah is still the rivalry game and still Utah. Arizona State looks really, really tough. There's still a lot of tests. I have no idea what's going to happen in the next 6 games, but there's nothing on the schedule, the second half of the season, that I'm scared of if I'm a BYU fan. And in fact, I think those 6 teams are looking at that BYU game, and fans of those 6 teams are now seeing BYU on their schedule and going, ugh, ugh, I don't know if I like that. That's huge. BYU, after this win against Arizona, 41-19, controlling every aspect of the game. It's great. I mean, that was the best 4 quarters that we have seen from BYU this year. The one knock on BYU, and it's been fair. I haven't agreed, but I've heard it from national analysts, and it's been fair, is that nothing BYU did against Kansas State was repeatable. So you can't really bank on that happening. Even the SMU win, it wasn't repeatable. BYU got away with a few turnovers. It was all on the defense. We've heard all of these little caveats and these little asterisks and the fine print that has come along with every BYU win so far. There is no fine print after this win over Arizona. There are no asterisks. There is nothing else to say. This was a convincing win, and it's fitting that it goes to bowl eligibility. It's fitting that it happens on BYU's biggest stage with big noon kickoff, nationally broadcast on Big Fox throughout the whole network. Gus Johnson, Joel Klatt. I mean, this was BYU's biggest stage of the year. They put together their best 4 quarters against an offense that's very, very good. And against a defense that, hey, look, they held Utah to 10 points just a couple of weeks ago, right? I mean, this was an all-around performance from BYU. Just fantastic. Quick players of the game, guys that stood out the most. The entire defensive line. I don't know what the total sack number was. I think looking at the box score here, it looks like BYU only finished with 1 sack and 5 tackles for loss. They hit Noah Fifita. We'll see what the final numbers are, but I would imagine they had 15 or 16 quarterback hits and probably 20 or 21 pressures. Fifita dropped back 52 times for pass. I mean, he only completed 50% of those. He was 26 of 52. BYU's defensive line lived in the backfield. Tyler Batty was there. Blake Bagelson had some big plays. Isaiah Banya had some big plays. The defensive line was phenomenal. Isaiah Glasker, like I said, fitting that he got that pick six because he was everywhere in this game. Fred Warner was on the sideline, here for homecoming. San Francisco played earlier this week. Fred Warner was here. Isaiah Glasker looked a little Fred Warner-ish to me. I mean, the way that he can drop into coverage, but then get after the passer, the way that he can impact the game from that linebacker spot at all 3 levels of the defense, that's what Fred Warner did at BYU. That's what made him so special. I think we should all wear neck rolls to church out of like solidarity and celebration of Isaiah Glasker because he looks phenomenal. So he's a quick player of the game for me. Jake Retzlaff, he just continues to do the things that we didn't know if he could do coming into the year. He needed to protect the football. That was a problem. BYU let wins get away. That's what all of us, me, everybody was afraid of coming into the season. At home, he has not turned the ball over yet this year. I mean, he's been spectacular through 3 games at home. Another, like I said, another tidy performance from Jake Retzlaff. He was great. And then maybe the biggest MVP of the game for me, that probably didn't get talked about enough, Bruce Mitchell gets the tough task of stepping in for Connor Pay. Sonny Mocassini is hurt. He doesn't play. And Jake Eichhorn, he was the backup center coming out of camp. He's got a back injury that kept him away from the game today. It's Bruce Mitchell. Nobody saw him coming. He was a low-rated recruit. I think he was a two-star at a South Summit High School defensive tackle at the time. He plays center today, and he played. I mean, there was no moment of that game that you looked at it and said, Bruce Mitchell's a problem. Bruce Mitchell's a liability. He wasn't. He was great. He was great all game long. The running game got going. Bruce Mitchell kept everything at bay. That's an aggressive Arizona defense. They send a lot of pressures. Bruce Mitchell was spectacular. He's maybe my biggest MVP of the game because he maybe outperformed the expectations more than anybody else. I'm going to have a lot of thoughts about this game throughout the week, especially going into Friday when BYU plays Oklahoma State. What can they draw from this game? What can they continue? All that good stuff. I'm really impressed. I'm impressed with the defense. I'm impressed with the offense. I thought the play calling was spectacular. Special teams was great. I have no notes. There are no notes right now for BYU. Yeah, Ropati, don't fumble the ball. You wish you had a few plays back here and there. But by and large, very, 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 very good game. Very impressive from BYU. Anxious to see what happens because I think there's been a lot of national media and a lot of voters in the AP poll that have held back. They haven't believed. They haven't seen BYU do it in a convincing fashion. This was convincing, and everybody in the country had a chance to see it. Anxious to see what happens when the polls come out tomorrow and what the conversation is about BYU throughout the rest of the week. But as for me and my house, we're believers. I mean, there's nobody left on the schedule that BYU can't beat. Not saying they'll go 6-0. Not saying they're going to go 12-0 this year. But there's nobody on the schedule that I'm looking at and saying, no chance BYU wins that game. They are going to have a chance to win every game. The goal was a bowl game. That goal is achieved. Now the goal is much, much bigger. The goal is a conference championship. BYU is in a position to do it. Let's see if they can go out and do it. Appreciate you guys. This was fun. Instant reaction show. This was great. Appreciate you guys for sticking around with me. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And until next time, give them hell and go Cougs.